Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Psalm 36, the wicked and the upright. We begin with the superscription for the choir director. We're not used to seeing that one, at least not in this section of the Psalms. And then a Psalm of David. But notice he's called the servant of the Lord. And that term servant, you could have rendered it servant. You could have also rendered it's the same word for slave. Um, and this is a reminder that David, even though early in his life he was a shepherd, later he becomes king, but all throughout, from beginning to end, he sees himself as the servant of the Lord. Now we begin with the actual psalm in verse 1. Transgression speaks to the ungodly within his heart. And here's what the ungodly is thinking or living out. There's no fear of God before his eyes. Um, and think about the Proverbs that talk about the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Well, his mind isn't there. There is no fear of God before his eyes, for it flatters him in his own eyes concerning the discovery of his iniquity and the hatred of it. So it's picturing the unbeliever. Notice that last phrase concerning the discovery of his iniquity and the hatred of it. That's a little hard to follow. The King James renders it until his iniquity be found to be hateful. I'm not sure that's any more helpful. The NIV might help us with that idea, and I don't think it's a different idea, but it's the same one, maybe a little bit easier to understand. Notice flatters him in his own eyes, too much to detect or hate their sin. That is perhaps the idea that he gets to think that nobody's going to see what I did, so it's okay. He doesn't fear the Lord, or nobody's going to. He doesn't really hate his sin. He actually loves it, and he doesn't realize that he's digging. Can I say it this way? He's digging his own grave. That's the picture of the one who has no fear of God. We continue into verse 3, still looking at the wicked. The words of his mouth are wickedness and deceit, and things that he says. He has ceased to be wise to do and to do good. Notice the opposite of wisdom isn't just foolishness, it's that too, but it's also wickedness. Verse 4, he plans wickedness upon his bed. It's just with him day and night. He sets himself on a path that is not good. He does not despise evil. So what we're seeing in verses 1 through 4 is the character of the wicked. Next, we go to verse 5. Your loving kindness, O Lord, extends to the heavens. So we went from looking at the wicked to speaking to the Lord and describing the Lord to himself. Your loving kindness extends to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Your righteousness is like the mountains of God. Your judgments are like a great deep, O Lord. You preserve, and notice these are all descriptions of his loving kindness, faithfulness, righteousness, judgment. But also notice he preserves, O Lord, you preserve or save man and beast. How precious is your loving kindness, O God, and the children of men take refuge in the shadow of your wings. Now notice in this description of God, it takes us back, at least in verses 5 and 6, it takes us back to creation. Your loving kindness, O Lord, extends to the heavens. Remember, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Reaches to the skies. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Your righteousness, like the mountains of God. Your judgments, like a great deep. Think about verse 2. The Spirit of God was moving upon the great deep. And then, O Lord, you preserve both man and beast. That's creation language. That's Genesis chapter 1 language. But then verse 7, how precious is your loving kindness, O God, and the children of men take refuge in the shadow of your wings. Now that last phrase, we've seen that phrase, in the shadow of your wings, a lot in the Old Testament. And when you have that word wing, of course, we think of, in English, we think of a bird, and that works, except that there was another use of the term, that term describing a wing could also refer to the edges of your outer garment. So think about the book of Ruth, where that word is actually used twice. The first time it's used is when Ruth first shows up in Bethlehem, and Boaz hears about how she has been taking care of her mother-in-law, and Boaz pronounces a blessing upon her. May the Lord bless you, under whose wings you have found refuge. And so the same sort of thing in the shadow of your wings. But there's also later on in that same story, remember how Ruth finds out that Boaz is a near relative, and there was something going on where it was considered appropriate for a widow who had no children to go and bear children with that close relative. And so she shows up where he is in the middle of the night, and she says to, he's asleep, and he's out with the folks that are threshing grain, and they're making sure they're sleeping out there, no, making sure nobody takes it, but not in the middle of the night. And all of a sudden he wakes up, and there's this young woman down by his feet, and she says, "Spread your wing over me." It's the same word, of course, as "spread your robe over me," and it's sort of a proposition. Now he says, "Well, we're not going to do it that way. We'll do it properly. We'll get married, and I've got to make some arrangements." The story continues from there. But notice, the children of men take refuge in the shadow of the wings of the Lord, and it also reminds us how Jesus left Jerusalem after he had been rejected and before his crucifixion. And he goes up to the top of Mount of Olives, and he weeps over the city, and he says, how often I wanted to gather you like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. And there's a longing there that we find precious, but which has been rejected by the evil man. But we find it precious because that is our place of refuge. Our place of refuge is the cross, the one who died in our place, and we have come to him for refuge. Well, we continue, verse 8. They drink their fill of the abundance of your house. And so notice we had in verses 1 through 4 the character of the wicked, the evil character of the wicked. We have the righteous character of the Lord himself, and we're still seeing that here in verse 8. This is they that find shelter under his wings. They drink their fill of the abundance of your house, and you give them to drink of the river of your delights. That's a good thing. Think about how we come to the Lord's table and we eat and we drink, and we find salvation there. And then verse 9, for with you is found, and we still have that drinking theme, for with you is found the fountain of life. So he provides the river, he provides the fountain, and we drink from it. And latter part of verse 9, in your light, we see light. You see, if you've come to the light, then you can see, you can not just see the light, you can see that too, but you can see reality. And because he is in the light, we're called to walk in that light and see the world through the lens of that light. And we see a great deal more when we're in the light, when we're connected to the one who is light. So in your light, we see light. And of course, we're going next, going to be a very short psalm, verses 10 through 12, we're going to see the prayer of the righteous to the Lord. So we have the evil character of the wicked, the righteous character of the Lord, and the prayer of the righteous to the Lord. And I think part of that is Lord, in your light we see light, and we want to stay there. We want to be in that light. Let's look at it. Verse 10, oh, continue your loving kindness to those who know you, and your righteousness to the upright in heart. But notice, this time, instead of speaking about God, it's speaking to God. And so this is a plea, this is a request. Continue your loving kindness to those who know you, and your righteousness to the upright in heart. Let not the foot of pride come upon me. So verse 10 is asking, Lord, continue these things, but also don't let something else happen. Let not the foot of pride come upon me, and let not the hand of the wicked drive me away. You see, it's not presumption. It's not saying, yes, I know I'm righteous and art I wonderful. No, there's a understanding of the frailty and the fallenness of the one who's praying. And so this is how Jesus taught his disciples to pray. He said, remember, do not lead us into evil, or into the evil one, literally, but deliver us from the evil one. Lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Um, and so let not the hand of the wicked drive me away. And then describing what that looks like, verse 12, there the doers of iniquity have fallen. They've been thrust down and cannot rise. And the psalmist says, and I don't want to go there. Now, Jesus told a parable about a Pharisee and a tax collector each going to pray. Notice the difference in this prayer with that of the Pharisee. The Pharisee said, Lord, it's wonderful that I'm like this. I'm righteous and I do all these good things. Um, Notice the prayer here is not that I do all these good things. It's rather continue your mercy, your loving kindness, and your uprightness to the upright in heart. I want to be there, but don't let me go the way of the wicked. There's no presumption here. And think about how the tax collector went and prayed in that parable, and he said, Lord, forgive me, um, forgive my iniquity. He prays a prayer of repentance, not of presumption, but of repentance, and we're called to do the same.